Okay, so when you hear the phrase World War III, what's the first thing that pops into your head? If you're like, well, pretty much everyone, it's this terrifying apocalyptic movie scene, right? Mushroom clouds, total destruction, the whole world just ending in an afternoon. But what if that whole 20th century idea of global conflict is literally blinding us to what's actually happening right now in the 21st century? Welcome to today's Explainer. We're totally reimagining what modern global conflict actually looks like. We're going to unpack this absolutely fascinating and honestly kind of chilling analysis of how modern adversaries are fighting a totally new kind of war, one that targets literally everything from global supply chains right down to your own neighborhood.
Think of me as your strategic guide for this one. We're going to start way up high on the global map and then zoom all the way down into our own domestic front lines. So we'll hit 5 key areas. First, redefining World War III. Second, the interconnected proxy matrix. Third, modernizing Soviet active measures. Fourth, the internal erosion strategy. And finally, number 5, a call for resilience. Let's just jump right in.
All right, diving into our first massive paradigm shift. Section 1, redefining World War III, or a coordinated strategy of exhaustion.
To really wrap our heads around the modern geopolitical landscape, we've got to challenge our preconceived notions and ask, what does World War III actually look like? Now, as the source material points out, there's never really been a solid consensus on this, but it argues the super simple, undeniable point against that whole sudden nuclear flash idea. To reach an ending, there has to be a beginning. And that beginning, it might not look like a declared war at all.
So here's the core contrast we really need to grasp. The myth we all know is that swift, apocalyptic nuclear finale. But the reality presented in our source analysis, it's something called a highly coordinated strategy of strategic exhaustion. Instead of your classic, conventional kinetic escalation where massive armies are just clashing head-on, adversaries are actually executing this slow, interconnected bleed of Western resources. It's not about vaporizing the enemy in one shot, it's about exhausting them, physically, economically, and psychologically, all across multiple theaters.
To see exactly how this plays out, let's transition to the macro level. Section 2, the interconnected proxy matrix, or the global encirclement.
Now, the war in Ukraine is fundamentally central to this whole analysis. According to the source, Ukraine basically shattered the illusion of this happy, cooperative, globalized economy. It forced nations to pick a side. The text actually compares Ukraine to the pre-WW Spanish Civil War. It's acting as the primary geopolitical arena, a testing ground really, where a new axis of upheaval is refining military doctrines and cementing their formal alliances before a broader, conflagration breaks out. And you've got to notice the invisible strings connecting these nations into a deeply interdependent military-industrial base. Just look at these contributions. We aren't just talking about moral support here. North Korea is pumping out millions of physical artillery shells. Iran is handing over the architecture and the actual factories for Shahed drones. And China? China is feeding the whole machine with vital microelectronics, machine tools, and satellite imagery. It's a highly coordinated, fully functioning network.
And this brilliantly shows how that network operates in real time to just exhaust Western allies. It's this continuous interconnected loop. Day 1, Chinese tech feeds Russian factories. Month 1, those factories pump out weapons that, alongside Iranian drones, strike Kyiv. Fast forward a year, and Russian military tech flows right back to Tehran to pressure Israel. By sparking these simultaneous fires across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, this rapid loop literally forces Western allies to dilute their stockpiles and their political willpower across all these disconnected fronts. I mean, you can't concentrate your forces if you're stuck playing whack-a-mole everywhere all at once, right?
But here's the thing. The encirclement extends way beyond the battlefields making headline news. If we pan the map south to the African front, the source highlights how Russia's Africa Corps, which you might remember as the Wagner Group, has systematically displaced Western influence in the Sahel region in places like Mali and Niger. And this isn't just a land grab, it's about controlling critical mineral supply chains and major migration routes. They're deliberately destabilizing Europe's southern flank and squeezing resources, all without ever officially declaring war.
Then we've got the maritime bottlenecks, Iran-backed Houthi rebels severely disrupting the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. This acts as a massive economic proxy front. By forcing cargo ships to reroute all the way around Africa, it inflicts this massive global inflation that, honestly, you feel every single time you check out at the grocery store. It's economic warfare disguised as localized rebellion. It shows us exactly how proxy forces can inflict severe damage on Western economies without ever triggering a direct state-on-state war.
So, we've seen the physical encirclement. Let's move on to Section 3, modernizing Soviet active measures, or the overarching strategy.
we're zooming in on the non-kinetic tactics that are totally reshaping international security. To truly understand this overarching strategy of subversion, the source actually anchors the modern crisis in an old historical KGB term, aktivne meropryatya, or active measures. Back during the Cold War, this meant using disinformation, sabotage, and front organizations to weaken an adversary from the inside out. Well, today, Western powers are facing a modernized, absolutely supercharged revival of those exact same tactics.
Look at how these modern active measures actually manifest today. We're seeing physical and cognitive sabotage completely blending together. European intelligence has been warning of a sharp surge in state-backed arson, not to mention the incredibly dangerous GPS jamming of commercial flights over the Baltic region. These are low-cost, low-risk methods used to exhaust domestic security. And on the cognitive side, adversaries are deploying AI-supercharged bot farms to polarize electorates. The goal isn't even necessarily to push one specific politician, it's to take our natural domestic political divisions and twist them into critical national security vulnerabilities.
So, the really crucial point here is this. What is the ultimate objective of all this chaos? Well, by attacking the economy through shipping routes, the culture through disinformation, and physical security through sabotage, adversaries are trying to break the West's internal structure. The end goal is to induce a psychological state of defeatism. They want to make the public feel so exhausted, so deeply divided, that they just throw their hands up and yield global hegemony without a massive, direct military clash ever needing to happen. It's basically the ancient art of winning without fighting.
All right, now we are zooming all the way into the domestic front. Section 4, the internal erosion strategy, the domestic front.
Nowhere is this strategy clearer than in what the source analysis terms reverse opium imperialism. Now, history rarely repeats itself perfectly, but it definitely has a dark sense of irony, because this is a deliberate historical inversion of the 19th century opium wars. By serving as the primary source of precursor chemicals flowing directly to Mexican cartels, foreign adversaries are weaponizing supply chains to deliberately exploit Western vulnerabilities.
Let's actually walk step by step through this vicious cycle of socioeconomic attrition to vividly see how it works. Step 1. Foreign precursor chemicals flow straight to cartels. Step 2. The cartels synthesize and distribute fentanyl. Step 3. The ensuing epidemic severely clogs the target nation's healthcare and judicial systems. Step 4. Hundreds of thousands of casualties tragically degrade the pool of military-eligible youth. And Step 5. Billions of dollars end up having to be diverted away from national defense just to manage this massive domestic crisis. This is literally hybrid warfare, attriting a population without a single uniform ever crossing a border.
And compounding that socioeconomic attrition is what the source calls multi-vector radicalization. Basically, the domestic front gets squeezed from two sides. Externally, you've got ideological threats like Islamic extremism, exploiting porous borders and digital echo chambers to set up cells. But internally, you have homegrown political polarization being actively pushed past normal civil debate and into partisan militancy. The source makes a super profound observation right here. When a society begins to view its own fellow citizens as existential enemies, it suffers a complete paralysis of political will. It literally can't project power globally because its security agencies are forced to be entirely focused inward.
Which brings us to our final section, the active measures are in play. Section 5, a call for resilience, protecting the home front.
So, the answer outlined in the source lies in a massive conceptual pivot. Western leaders have to transition away from reactive crisis management, just putting out fires as they pop up, and move to a proactive, forward-looking strategy of total theater resilience. This means fundamentally understanding that the stability of our domestic institutions, the security of our physical borders, and the overall cohesion of our society are just as critical to our survival as overseas defense budgets. You simply cannot project strength abroad if your foundation is crumbling at home.
The source material leaves us with this really stark, resonant warning. If leadership fails to recognize this unconventional landscape as the true front line of a modern world war, the West is going to find its stockpiles depleted, its global alliances severed, and its internal structures broken. Ultimately, quote, losing the global order not to a single decisive clash, but to 1,000 unanswered cuts.
And that brings us to the ultimate question we really have to walk away with today. We've seen the interconnected proxy matrix, we've traced the Soviet active measures right down to our local supply chains and our daily digital feeds. The strategy of exhaustion is already in motion, so can Western leadership actually pivot their paradigm and embrace total theater resilience before the home front fractures completely? It's a massive question that demands an answer, and one that honestly should fundamentally change how you view the daily news. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.